Salama family, salama. How y'all doing today? Hope you're blessed and highly favored. So we're gonna talk about some things today. I was holding off on talking about this because I was doing some extensive research, but I decided to talk about it since some news items came out, and it's interesting. So some of the stuff I'm gonna talk about today, of course, is theoretical at some levels and historical at others, right? So I'm gonna make some educated guesses on some things. Uh, so I'm not saying I'm dogmatic on it. Now, the other thing is at the end of this particular discussion or research, um, I'm gonna show a little video someone shared with me, and it's very interesting. I don't know what to make of it, but you know, just something you all should take note of. And concerning the inauguration tomorrow, the rumors are still going around in the right wing evangelical side. We'll see what happens. I mean, something did happen on the 6th, so who knows? Had to drink a little tea there. So let me share my screen. Now, all of this is sort of it's going to be a mixed discussion. It's going to be a mixed discussion. One dealing with the historicity of the Ark of the Covenant being in Africa. The other dealing with the location of Jerusalem. So, as you know, I don't believe the current location of Jerusalem in the Middle East is the biblical location of Jerusalem. I don't believe that's Mount Zion or anything. I don't believe it. It doesn't fit the biblical definition, nor does it fit some of the historical descriptions of ancient Jerusalem. So, as I believe that the area of Negro land, which goes all the way to, the Niger River, all the way up to the Nile, that's supposed to be Negro land, which would include areas within Ethiopia where we see a lot of Israelites, right? So we're going to discuss that because when you look at the preponderance of the evidence, right, it leads you to ask certain questions because we know for a fact Israel is all over Africa, what we call Africa. Israel is all over. So we have to understand also, and this from my viewpoint, you can have your own, but I believe that some of the locations that we call like let's say for instance Lebanon and Jordan, I'm not convinced. This is just theorizing here. I'm not convinced that's the biblical Jordan and the biblical Lebanon. Just like there's some other scholars from the past who said that Tarshish was the Ivory Coast and not Spain, as we hear today. So a lot of the issues that you may have with my supposition is going to be based upon current maps and what you think you know. I'm throwing out what they've told me, right? I'm throwing out, let me say, some of what they told me and reevaluating what they told me against scripture and looking at people groups. Because even though people migrate, they usually stick in the, close to the area, right? Sort of like what happened with Syria. You had a lot of Syrians leave Syria and went to Europe, but a lot of them stayed. So I think that's the normal method of migration during wartime and things like that. That's just my opinion. All right, so 750 killed at Ethiopian Orthodox Church said to contain Ark of the Covenant. Around 750 people were killed in an attack on an Orthodox church, which is said to contain the Ark of the Covenant described in the book of Exodus in the Bible. in northern Ethiopia's war-torn Tigray region, home to thousands of churches, monasteries, according to reports. So I'm gonna continue reading this, but here's what I'll let you know. And my brother Rawls and I, we talked about this a little bit in the past. So there's two locations that I think Jerusalem may have been. You know, my lesser idea is the area in South Africa, right? The area, what is it again? I'm going blank right now. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The Kalahari Desert, right? That's sort of low on my totem pole. Where I really think it could be, right? Because we're researching, and you know where I think it could be is in the Tigray region. I think Jerusalem could be in the Tigray region. The other area I think Jerusalem could be is over there in the Mountain of the Moons, or what they call the Rwenzori mountains over in Uganda. So up in that little area, I think the real Jerusalem could be. Just my opinion. My number one guess, though, is over there in the Tigray area, right? And my second guess would be over there by the Rwenzori mountains, the Mountain of the Moon. My third guess would be the Kalahari. Okay, so let me finish reading. Hundreds of people hiding in Maryam Zion Church in Axum amid an armed conflict were brought out and shot to death. And local residents believe the aim was to take the Ark of the Covenant in Addis Ababa. The Belgium-based nonprofit European External Program with Africa reported in this month's situational report. The number of people killed is reported as 750. It said, the church most ancient and sacred of Ethiopian Christianity, and also known as the Church of St. Mary of Zion, belongs to the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church. I've not heard more than rumors about the looting of the Ark from Maryam Zion, but it is true that up to 750 died defending it. It is conceivable that the attackers didn't stop there, said Michael Gervers, a professor of history at the University of Toronto, according to the Telegraph. The government and the Eritreans want to wipe out the Tigrayan culture. They think they're better than the rest of the people in the country. The looting is about destroying and removing the cultural presence of Tigray, Gervers explained. So understand why they would want to remove the history and the culture of the Tigray people. The reason why they would want to remove the history and the culture of the Tigray people is because they are Israelites, right? They've been there forever, right? I'm gonna tell you this: most of the people there, most of the people in Ethiopia, and most of them in Tigray are Israelites, and we'll see as we go. And some converted to Christianity, right? And we know in the scriptures they're some of the first converts to Christianity. But you got to understand something, and I'm gonna continue on, and I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna make this statement right now, and I'll prove it as we go. All right. So there was no such place called Ethiopia as a nation. Ethiopia as a nation never existed, not until 1926. Okay. So what we have here is a location, once again, taking on the description of something or the image of something. So if you look at the old maps, we know that Ethiopia, right? Ethiopia was in reference to the continent. And some say mainly the part of Africa south of, what we call sub-Sahara today. But if you look at the old maps, you had the Ethiopian Ocean. The continent was called Ethiopia. So when they referred to Ethiopians, it was in reference to what we call Africans today. But let me continue, and I'll make my case as we go. So former BBC World Service Africa editor and senior research fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, Martin Plaut, said that those who escaped the Axum massacre had reported that the attack began after Ethiopian federal troops and Amhara militia approached the church, the UK's Church Times reported. So Who attacked them? Ethiopian federal troops. Why? Why did the Ethiopian federal troops attack them? According to the people who were there, they say they wanted the ark. I think that could be the case, but let's continue. People were worried about the safety of the ark, and when they heard troops were approaching, feared they had come to steal it. All those inside the cathedral were forced out into the square, Plot was quoting as saying. About 1,000 people were believed to be in the church complex at the time of the attack. The EEPA said the massacre was carried out by Ethiopian federal troops and allied Amhara militia that are fighting the Tigray People's Liberation Front. So what they're trying to do right now, in my opinion, is get rid of any of the old cultures, continuing the extermination of any Israelite view or culture or whatever. And all of that culture is going over to what we call modern Israel. So the church and the ark have likely not been damaged, Plots added. The fighting began in Tigray since November 4th, when the region's ruling political party, Tigray People Liberation Front, captured the Northern Command Army base in the regional capital, Mekelle, as part of an uprising, after which the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed ordered a military offensive. Abiy claimed on November 28th that the Ethiopian National Defense Force had regained full command of the Mekelle. However, humanitarian workers say the fighting continues. All right, so according to some of the people there, they were after the ark. Now, like I said, I'm speculating on some things, so here's why I think they were after the ark. I think when Abiy Ahmed met with Netanyahu, that there was an agreement. And this is why, they were supposed to send 2,000 Jews, but I think it was like 300, maybe 5, right, that went over to Israel. So Netanyahu to immediately bring 2,000 Ethiopian Jews to Israel. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed approves the immigration plan, praises Israeli primer for signing Abraham Accords with UAE, Bahrain. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told his Ethiopian counterpart Abiy Ahmed on Friday that he intends to bring to Israel some 2,000 Ethiopian Jews currently in Addis Ababa and Gondar waiting to immigrate. In a phone conversation during which the two leaders discussed regional issues, Ahmed readily agreed to move and stressed the special bond between the people of Ethiopia and Israel, the Israeli Prime Minister's office said in a statement. Ahmed also congratulated Netanyahu on the Abraham Accords, the U.S. brokered peace agreements that Israel reached with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain last month, saying that the positive ramifications of the deals will only be understood by future generations, according to this statement. Netanyahu and Ahmed also discussed the possibility of deepening agricultural cooperation between the two countries. So my question is, what other agreements did they agree to? Approximately 13,000 Jews currently reside in Addis Ababa, the Ethiopian capital, and in Gondar in the northern part of the African country. According to AP, most live in poverty and are waiting to be taken to Israel, which they consider their homeland. Many have family members who have been living in Israel since Operation Solomon in 1991, when Israel airlifted some 14,500 Jews out of Ethiopia in less than 2 days. Some 250 people have left for Israel within the past year until COVID came. Now, the travel has stopped, but Israeli officials are conducting interviews online. So I'm going to stop right there. It's pretty much the end. But understand that there was an agreement going on. We don't know what the full agreement stipulated, right? My guess is that part of the agreement would be that Ethiopia would hand Israel the Ark of the Covenant, which is why you had Ethiopian federal troops attacking a church. Why else would you be attacking a church? Right? It's been rumored that the Ark of the Covenant is in one of those churches or in Ethiopia's hand for years. For years. Now the question, why would Israel, the Ish people, why would they want the ark? Third temple is only cured for corona, says Israeli rabbi. So if they're still moving ahead with the plan for the third temple, then they would want the Ark of the Covenant. Now, as I said, I don't believe that's the land. I don't believe that's the Temple Mount. But the reason why, like if you got a fake people, right, in a fake land, right, and you're going to have a fake temple and you're going to have a fake Messiah, right? I'm just saying. So we have to ask questions. So as we go on, we're going to see the history of this area, right? The history of what we today call Ethiopia, because here's the thing. They tell you that the name is Ethiopia, and that's what they call it today, right? Well, it used to be called the Abyssinia Empire before that. It used to be called the Axum Empire before that. And it used to be called the Demot. Never was it ever called Ethiopia. Now they're going to say, well, it was called Kush. It was never called Ethiopia. You got Kushites in that area. But let's continue and we'll move along. All right. So remember the churches in Ethiopia, right, and in the area of Tigray, right, have a huge, it's a wonder of the world type deal, right? Because in Lalibela, they have this church, and I'm gonna show it to you, and it's in the ground. So why am I interested in the Tigray region? Because it's really interesting when you look at some historical things. So don't think you're going to come to the same conclusion I came to, and don't do the same research I did. Okay, so I'm making my decision, my theory off of research I've done. So let's continue here.
ሰማዩ ከላይ ነው ይዣለው አየሩን በሳምባዬ ውስጥ በሳምባዬ ውስጥ በሳምባዬ በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን አንድ ቤት በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን በልባችን ያለው አንድ ነው ደማችን አንድ ቤት አንድ ቤት አንድ ቤት
So the towers of Tigray, I'm not going to show this video, but you can go and watch it. So there's these towers, right, in Tigray, and there are churches high up in the mountains. But there's also churches in the ground. And you have to understand that, the Ethiopian church, when the Most High sent them to the Jews first, right? They went to Africa. This is why you have such a history of the first, right? The first Jewish, what they call Christians. That's why there's a strong Christian presence in Ethiopia. Now, one thing they're not going to tell you is that the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia, right? They don't worship like the Western nations, right? The Orthodox Church in Ethiopia have Jewish traditions, but they believe in what? Salvation by grace through faith in Christ. They have Jewish practices, but they are Christians. They are the early church. They're not the Romanized church. Now, I'm not saying they don't have Roman influences. They do have some. But they still, that was one of the dividing lines between them and the Roman church. See, we all caught up in Eurocentric theology, where if we go to African Christianity, you got a different deal going on there. And so, you know, we want to assume that our interpretation, which is Eurocentric, which is Catholic based, right, has the correct interpretation. I think right now the current church, or the Israelites, the chosen people of Yah, the ones who are moving back to the law, not for salvation, but as a means of obedience, on a correct path. See, they want to act like you don't have to keep what God told you to keep, but that's a different discussion. So let's continue. So here you have what they call the Lalibela Church. So the churches of Lalibela in Ethiopia are pieces of architecture that fascinate visitors with their underground constructions. The region is called, what is the region called, y'all? What is it called? What is the region called? It's called the Jerusalem of Ethiopia. I don't think that's a coincidence, okay? I'm not saying this is Jerusalem, right? But I'm saying culturally wise, right? And because they have such a Orthodox Christian or Christianity from the biblical days, and the fact that most of these people who are Christians in Ethiopia are former Israelites, right? That there's a history here that we don't know about. And this is what I'm trying to bring forward. And the reason why I wanted to bring it forward now is because I don't know if tomorrow I'm going to be able to bring it forward. I'm cautious, right? I don't know what's going to happen at the inauguration. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking like, okay, I'm going to do this a few months from now. But no, I don't know if I'm going to have a few months from now. Be honest with your family. I'm looking to get on that plane or that boat or whatever and head on out of here. That's what I'm looking forward to. But anyway, let me continue. So the region is called the Jerusalem of Ethiopia, as Ethiopian King Gebre Meskel Lalibela wanted to build a second Jerusalem in the area, as the roads leading to Jerusalem were not safe. He wanted to build a second Jerusalem, what? In the area, as the roads leading to Jerusalem were not safe. Leading to Jerusalem where? To that Middle East, crossing over the Red Sea, going over through Egypt. Which road wasn't safe? See, which Jerusalem are we talking about? So he made a second Jerusalem because the roads were not safe. Well, where's the original? See, that's why I say I'm leaning to this area as being the area where the true Jerusalem is. And there's a whole bunch I'm not going to cover, really. I mean, because there's some things prophetically wise, right, where the Bible talks about Jerusalem, how she's desolate and how Jerusalem cannot feed her people anymore, right? Those scriptures. I was going to bring those scriptures out, but I don't have time for that. But y'all could go look it up. How the Bible said that Jerusalem was desolate and she can't feed her people anymore. Anybody ever remember the big old famine of Ethiopia? Where was the famine of Ethiopia? In the Tigray region. I'm just saying, but let's continue. It's speculation, family. I'm just guessing. Ain't nobody around here got hard evidence. It's circumstantial. Okay.
The rock churches of Liabella are one of the wonders of the world. Built in the 12th century, these 11 underground churches were cut out of solid rock and sunk 50 feet below the surface.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? You've got these churches from the 12th century, carved out of solid rock, absolutely incredible. And you go inside them and they're like real, I don't know, like a shrine, I suppose. Obviously they're living churches, they're working churches. It took 23 or 24 years to build these churches. Solid stone, solid rock. Start at the top, just work the way down.
It's been estimated that the builders had to move 150,000 tons of rock over 2 decades to complete this project. And now we are going to explore this labyrinth of tunnels and sealed mazes. To do this, we have brought our tiny camera, lower in quality, but it can see through small gaps and reveal hidden rooms and tunnels. We're heading now into the underground tunnel system that links these rock churches together. There's some of them that still haven't been explored because they just can't get into them without destroying the entrance.
Down the tunnel into another church.
All right, so I'm gonna just leave it there. So it's not about the naming. See, y'all getting it twisted. It's not about the fact that it's the second Jerusalem by name. That's not the point. What the point is as I always try to tell you all, it's the building of the picture. It's the pieces that make up the image. It's not one piece. Yes, it's important that you have one piece that says it's the second Jerusalem, but at the same time, it's the history. It's the history of the area. It's what other people have said. So when we talk about this area, right, we're talking about an entire area. Now, like I said, it's only speculation on my part, and thank you, Shauna, for the gift. It's only speculation on my part. Can the Kalahari Desert be valid? Yeah, it could be, right? But at the same time, remember, all of this was taken from us. Our identity, our heritage, all these things were stolen. So just as we do DNA and all this stuff, and we're looking at our history and see where we belong, we're looking at history to see what is correct. Because all the nations conspired against us. So we're trying to figure this thing out, right? So am I right? I don't know. I'm just showing you what I see, right? You can have your opinion. I'm going to have mine. So Gishon, a place where a portion of the cross on which Jesus Christ is crucified is kept in Ethiopia. Gishon is one of the places of immense significance in the Ethiopian church and Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. Perhaps even for Christianity itself, it has got a portion of the cross on which Jesus Christ is crucified is located. The Bible explicitly suggests that the first Christian convert was the Ethiopian eunuch, written in Acts 8, before the disciples of Jesus went outside of Israel to preach to Christ. Now, as I told you, there was no such place as Ethiopia. So when they call them an Ethiopian, they just mean a dark-skinned person. That could have been anybody from Africa. Okay? So Philip the Evangelist happened to meet the Ethiopian eunuch who posed questions about the Christian faith and Jesus Christ before he embraced Christianity. Later on, he came back to Ethiopia and preached the faith. The originality of Christianity in Ethiopia and the Ethiopian church is partly attributed to that story. So the question is this. See, you got to ask yourself the question. Okay, thank you, Tokyo, for the gift. Why was the Ethiopian there for the Passover? Why was he there? Now, let's assume he's coming from that same area we call Ethiopia, right? Then the reason why he was there is because he was an Israelite celebrating the feast. And so he learned of the Messiah and went back. And what happened? What happened? We have a bunch of Christians in Ethiopia who were former Israelites. Oh, you don't believe me? Oh, you know what? It's just the Falasha Jews. It's just the Falasha. The rest of them weren't necessarily Israelites. I know, I can hear it right now. Let's continue on and put that picture together. Adama, officially known as Adama and formerly Nazareth, is a city in central Oromia region, Ethiopia. Adama forms a special zone of Oromia and is surrounded by East Shua Zone. It is located at 8.54 north, 39.27 east at an elevation of 1712 meters, 99 kilometers southeast of Oromia's Addis Ababa. The city sits between the base of an escarpment to the west and the Great Rift Valley to the east. Great Rift Valley to the east. Now, I'm not saying that Great Rift Valley is the Valley of Armageddon, but it's a thought. But understand, even the word Nazareth could have been renamed since they, became a Christian nation. But at the same time, you have to look at the history of the area. What were they before they became Christians? That's the question. What were they before they became Christian? Put the pieces together. That's all we're trying to do is put the pieces together, right? And remember from past shows, right? We talk about Eldad the Danite. Where did he come from? Same area, right? Same area. All right. Beta Israel. Beta Israel, House of Israel, or Community of Israel, also known as Ethiopian Jews, Yahude, Ethiopia, or Ethiopia, are a Jewish community that developed and lived for centuries in the area of the Kingdom of Aksum and the Ethiopian Empire, which is currently divided between the modern-day Amhara and Tigray regions of Ethiopia. Most of the community immigrated to Israel in the late 20th century. The Beta Israel lived in northern and northwestern Ethiopia in more than 500 small villages spread over a wide territory along population that were Muslim and predominantly Christian. Most of them were concentrated mainly on what are today North Gondar Zone, Shire Inda Selassie, Wokwayet, Teslamdi, and I'm not going to even try the rest. They practice Hayamanot religious practices, which are generally recognized as an Israelite religion that differs from Rabbinic Judaism. So what did they practice? Hayamanot. Beta Israel appeared to have been isolated from mainstream Jewish communities for at least a millennium. They suffered religious persecution, and a significant portion of the community were forced into Christianity during the 19th and 20th centuries. Those converted became known as the Falasha Mura. The larger Beta Abraham Christian community is also considered to have historical links to Beta Israel. Most of the people who lived there were Israelites. They just call the rest of them Christians now. The Beta Israel made contact with other Jewish communities in the late 20th century. Following this, a rabbinic debate ensued over whether or not the Beta Israel were Jews. They all knew they were Jews. After halakhic Jewish law and constitutional discussions, Israeli officials decided in 1977 that the Israeli law of return was to be applied to the Beta Israel. Why? Because they knew they were the original Jews. The Israeli and the American governments mounted Aliyah transport operations. These activities included Operation Brothers in Sudan between 79 and 90. This includes the major Operation Moses and Operation Joshua, and in the 1990s from Addis Ababa. So my theory is that the reason why the Israelis want them there is to move them out of the area of true Jerusalem, of true Israel. By the end of 2008, there were 119,000 people of Ethiopian descent in Israel, including nearly 81,000 people born in Ethiopia and about 38,000 native-born Israelis. The Ethiopian Jewish community in Israel is mostly composed of Beta Israel, practicing both Hamaniyat and Rabbinic Judaism. And the only reason they're practicing Rabbinic is because now they're associated with them people in Israel. Throughout its history, the community has been referred to by numerous names. According to tradition, the same Beta Israel, literally House of Israel in Ge'ez, originated in the 4th century CE when the community refused to convert to Christianity during the rule of Abreha and Esbeha, identified with Sezana and Ezana, the monarchs of the kingdom of Axum who embraced Christianity. So you see right here, okay, they refused, a lot of them, to convert to Christianity. So that shows you that they were what? Israelites. All of them were Israelites. Some of them converted to Christianity. If you read the history, the king converted to Christianity, created the Axum Empire, and tried to get the rest of his people to convert. And some of them converted and some said no. This name contrasts with Beta Christian, literally House of Christianity, meaning church in Ge'ez. Originally, it did not have any negative connotations, and the community has since used Beta Israel as its official name. Since the 80s, it has also become the official name used in the scholarly and scientific literature to refer to the community. The term Esralawi Israelites, which is related to the name Beta Israel, is also used by the community to refer to its members. Now, remember, the original kingdom there was a kingdom of Jews. I'm going to show you that. And they pretty much said it right there. And the king converted to Christianity, and the Axum Empire became a Christian empire. But then you had the other empire, which still remained, which was called the Kingdom of Israel, or the Kingdom of Simeon. We're going to see. The name Ayud, Jews, is rarely used in the community as the Christians had used it as a derogatory term. The community has begun to use it only since strengthening ties with other Jewish communities in the 20th century. Now, I find it interesting before I go on, and I want to give a shout out to Second Exodus, for posting the information about the word Negro and how some translations tie the word Negro to the word Christian. Okay, so they were first called Negro in Antioch, right? That could be a valid interpretation if you look at the etymology of the word. The term Ibrawi, Hebrew, was used to refer to the Chawa, free man in the community, in contrast to Baryat, slave. The term Aritawa, Torah true, was used to refer to community members since the 19th century. It has been used in opposition to the term Falasha Mura. The derogatory term Falasha, which means landless, wanderers, was given to the community in the 15th century by the Emperor Yashak. And today its use is avoided because its meaning is offensive. Zagwe referring to the Agwa people of the Zagwe dynasty among the original inhabitants of northwest Ethiopia is considered derogatory since it incorrectly associates the community with the largely pagan Agwa. Hayamite Giz is the colloquial term for faith and used in the Jewish religion in the community, although it is also used by Ethiopian Orthodox Christians for their religion. So it's called Haymanat. Let's look at it. See, everything don't just come from Western Eurocentric Christianity. Haymanat. Haymanat Giz is the branch of Judaism which is practiced by the Beta Israel, also known as Ethiopian Jews. In both Giz and Amharic, Haymanat means religion or faith. Thus, in modern Amharic, it is common to speak of the Christian Haymanat, the Jewish Haymanat, or the Muslim Haymanat. The term is only associated with a particular religion, Judaism in Israel. But the people in modern Israel don't have Haymanat. They follow Judaism. So this is the old religion, if you want to call it that. The Mashafa Kedas, Holy Scriptures, is the name for the religious literature. The language of the writings is Giz. The holiest book is the Orit from Aramic, Orata Torah, which consists of the 5 books of Moses and the books of Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. So y'all want to ask us where the Torah is? There you go. The rest of the Bible has secondary importance. Sources are lacking on whether the book of Lamentations is excluded from the canon or whether it forms part of the book of Jeremiah as it does in the Orthodox Tewahedo biblical canon. Now, my question always has been, why hasn't anyone translated the Giz Bible into English? Why is that? Wouldn't you find that to be something worth translating? One of the oldest Bibles in the history of the world, written in the Giz language. Maybe there's something in there they don't want you to read. Just like I've always asked myself the question, why don't they translate or have translated those books in Timbuktu? Something to hide. So also in the canon of the Sirach, Judith, Esdras 1 and 2, Maccabean Jubilees, Baruch, Tobit, Enoch, and the Testaments of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Most of these are also found among the Deuterocanonical books or the biblical apocrypha. Okay, so which one is canon? Is it the 66 books or is it the oldest books out there in Ethiopia and Africa? Which one is canon? That's what I want to know. Them books y'all took out of the King James Version is still here. Which one's canon? Somebody playing games. Non-biblical writings include Nagara Muse, the Conversation of Moses, Mota Aaron, Death of Aaron, Mota Muse, Death of Moses, Tezaza Sanbat, Precepts of the Sabbath, Ardedet Students, Gorogios, Mashafa, Safat, Book of Hours, and on and on. Don't you think we should be reading these? I just want to know, do y'all think we should be reading these books, family? They're older than these European books. I just want to know, should we be reading this? Yes or no? Do y'all think we should be reading these books? Give me a 1 if you think we should. 2, no. That's what I'm saying. It makes no sense. Why aren't we dealing with the African books? Why are we dealing with the Catholic stuff? Why are we dealing with the Ashkenaz stuff? Why are we dealing with the Masoretic? We got Giz, which is older than that. What's up? But I'm not here to talk about canon and all that. Let me move on. See, they don't want us to get back to the African Christianity. They don't want us to get back to the African Orthodox version of Christianity, which has a lot of what they call it again, Judaizer stuff. That's what they call it. Not that you following it for salvation. It's a means of obedience. As I said, it's a light unto your path. It makes the simple wise. But they're using it. They're following those laws. Not as a means of salvation. Christ is their salvation. And that's another study. But I'm getting off tangent again. So archaeologists uncover stunning Aksumite and Roman artifacts in Ethiopia. So we know that the Romans were in North Africa, Northeast Africa, which looks like it appears to include Ethiopia. We know that the Romans occupied Jerusalem. Where is Jerusalem? Dazzling jewels from an Ethiopian grave reveal 2,000-year-old link to Rome. Spectacular 2,000-year-old treasures from the Roman Empire and Aksumite Kingdom, which ruled parts of the Northeast Africa for several centuries before 940 AD, have been discovered by British archaeologists in northern Ethiopia. Louis Schofield, a former British museum curator, headed a major 6-week excavation of the ancient city of Aksum, where her team of 11 uncovered graves with extraordinary artifacts dating from the 1st and 2nd centuries. They offer evidence that the Romans were trading there hundreds of years earlier than previously thought. Schofield told the Observer, every day we had shed loads of treasure coming out of all the graves. I was blown away. I'd been confident we'd find something, but not on this scale. Why? Why such a huge Roman presence? Sound to me like they were occupied. See, one of the issues I've had with the Kalahari location of Jerusalem is its proximity to Egypt. Now, I understand that in ancient times, Egypt probably went all the way up to the Sudan, all the way down to what they call Nubia, and maybe even came into parts of what we call, modern day Kenya and Tanzania. But at the same time, when we look at the headquarters, the center of the rulership, that appears to be where in the modern day Egypt, what we call it, what is the name of it? I'm losing it. I can't even think of it right now. But anyway, what we call modern Egypt. So Ethiopia is within a reasonable distance to travel to Egypt. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about as we go on is the relationship that Israel had with Ptolemy, right? And we talked about him in the past. Now, my question is, if our people know where the real Jerusalem is, why they keep hiding it? But at the same time, many say the Phalasha or the tribe of Dan. And the tribe of Dan shall be a serpent in the way, an adder that bite in a way that bite the horse's heel, causes him, the rider to fall over, whatever that means. But we know that the Phalasha are going over to modern Israel with the Ish people. See, Ethiopian Jews are African converts. That is dumb. I'm sorry. I ain't want to say it, but that's dumb. You know why that's dumb? I'm going to tell you why that's dumb. They have the longest history of anybody of being Israelites, dude. Why do you think they accepted them as Israelites? They got the longest history and traditions of Israelites going way, way, way back, dude. More than anybody. More than the Ashkenaz. More than the Sephardic. A continuous line of traditions. I'm just saying, even if you go read the book of read Eldad the Danite, let's get real. Let's not be making these statements without some facts. One of the places where I conducted, hold on, let me share it. They didn't endure any slavery because they are the tribe of Dan. One of the places where I conduct archaeological research is Ethiopia. Recently, my team, the Southern Red Sea Archaeological Histories Pronounced Sersa Project, published an exciting discovery. This post gives you a behind-the-scenes look at what went into the discovery and publication of Beta Samadhi. In case you want to read or skim the paper before reading the rest of the post, you can access it directly at Antiquity. What's the discovery? We discovered the ancient town of Beta Samadhi in Ethiopia. It was a significant trade, religious, and administrative center in the Aksumite world, and excavations have revealed important finds. Who were the Aksumites? The Aksumite Empire was a powerful kingdom occupying northeastern Ethiopia and Eritrea from around 80 BCE to 825 CE. They were internationally known as they controlled a good deal of the Red Sea trade. Though the Aksumite Empire was important and well known in antiquity, we still have a lot to learn about them. The Yeha region, within the bounds of the empire and located in present-day northeast Ethiopia, is of particular importance. The region's eponymous site, i.e. Yeha, yields evidence of the earliest complex polities in sub-Saharan Africa. Archaeological research has focused on the site of Yeha and its major pre-Aksumite temple. Limited research has been conducted throughout the rest of the region, and there seemed to be a lack of Aksumite sites. This led scholars to surmise that this area was abandoned after the pre-Aksumite period. However, the SRSAH team's recent survey results, publication coming soon, demonstrated that the region was not abandoned, and Beta Samadhi was one of the sites that our project documented. Why is this discovery significant? There is a multitude of reasons why Beta Samadhi's discovery is important. Perhaps one of the most important is that the excavation have helped clarify the intermixed nature of Aksumite political and religious authority. The discovery of a basilica and artifacts like crosses demonstrates early Christian religious traditions at Beta Samadhi. Certain figurines and brute crania evidence a mix of pagan traditions at the site too. The chronology of political and religious activity at Beta Samadhi spans time periods that include polytheism, conversion to Christianity, and the arrival of Islam. How did you discover the site? Similar to our work at Akir El Shamus in Oman, the discovery of Beta Samadhi was a team effort amongst members of our team and local residents. In 2009, the SRSH team spoke with the local residents of the modern village of Idaga and were pointed in the direction of the large hill. All right, so this is the area that they're talking about here, right? So it shows that there, you know, what was a Christian kingdom. Now, what we're going to discuss next So what I'm saying, family, Ethiopia has many different tribes. I'm not saying all of them were Israelites. I'm saying most of them were Israelites, and stick with me. We're not there yet. Okay. Now, all of this will tie back, and you know, you got to go back to some other shows when I talk about Eldad the Danite. And Eldad the Danite said, who else was in that area besides the tribe of Dan? Eldad the Danite stated that there were Ashur, he was there in that area, right? Simeon and some of Manasseh was in that area, right? Along with the tribe of Dan. Now, I showed you other videos where some of Simeon and Manasseh went over there into Asia, right? Over by the Caucasus. And they were black. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it. But if you look at, if you give credence to what Eldad the Danite said, many of the tribes were in that area, not just Dan. So many of what we see of those tribes there in that area of Tigray in Ethiopia, many of them were what? Israelites. Not all of them, because we know for a fact that Canaanites lived amongst Israel, Cushites lived amongst Israel, Hittites lived amongst Israel. So everybody is in Israel. But stick with me. I'm about to show you what I'm talking about. Okay. So remember what I said in the beginning, right? In the beginning, I stated that Ethiopia did not become Ethiopia till 1929. Before that, you had Abbasia, right? Or the Abyssinian Empire. Before that, you had Axum. And before that, you had Demont. But you also had what they called the Kingdom of Simeon. We're going to talk about that now. All right. So the Kingdom of Simeon. The Kingdom of Simeon, sometimes referred to as the Kingdom of Beta Israel, was an ancient kingdom of Beta Israel centered in the northwestern part of Ethiopian Empire that came to an end in 1627 during the reign of Emperor Susenos. It was preceded by a number of regions which were in Jewish rule in the northwest part of Ethiopia. See, stop right there. It was preceded what? It was preceded by what? A number of regions which were in Jewish rule in the northwest part of Ethiopia. The Jewish Ethiopian tradition dates the establishment of the Kingdom of Simeon to the 4th century, right after the Kingdom of Axum turned to Christianity during the reign of Izana of Axum. The dynasty of Ethiopian kings and privileged descendants of Zadok, who was a high priest during the reign of King David and King Solomon. According to the tradition of Beta Israel community, Zadok's son, Azariah, was sent to Ethiopia together with Menelik. Now remember, there was no place called Ethiopia. It was the Kingdom of Simeon. Before that, it was Demont. See, they split. Well, let me continue before I go. King Phineas, the first king of the Beta Israel during the time period of Emperor Izana of Axum. King Gideon IV, the father of Queen Judith. Queen Judith destroyed the Axumite Empire. King Gideon V led the revolt against the Emperor Zara Yacob. King Joram, the king of the Beta Israel during the time period of Emperor Gelawades of Ethiopia. King Radi, king of Beta Israel, after King Joram during time period of Emperor Menes of Ethiopia. King Caleb, king of Beta Israel, after King Radi during the time period of Emperor Sarasa Dingel of Ethiopia. King Goshen, king of Beta Israel during the time period of Emperor Sarsa Dingle. King Gideon VII, king of the Beta Israel during time period of Emperor Susanos of Ethiopia. King Pinchas, king of the Beta Israel after Gideon VII. So, and I'm going to continue reading. But you got to keep in mind the other historians and people like I said before, Eldad the Danite, and who Eldad the Danite said lived in those areas. Now we see that this area was ruled by Jews. It was called the Kingdom of Simeon. What happened was one of the kings ended up converting to Christianity later on, and that's where you get the Axum Empire from. The Axum Empire is the Christianized version of that area. It was not called Ethiopia back then. Every time you read here right now and they say Susanos of Ethiopia, there was no Ethiopia. It was the Axumite Empire or the Abyssinian Empire. According to the Beta Israel tradition, during its time, the kingdom was called the Kingdom of the Gideons, after the name of the dynasty of Jewish kings that ruled it. A document from the 10th century by an Arab historian states that the name of the kingdom which took over the Aksumite Empire after the revolt of Queen Judith is Hadani. Remember Eldad Hadani? This document might validate the documents of Eldad Hadani, who mentioned that the tribe of Dan exiled voluntarily and established an independent kingdom between the 15th century and the early 17th century. The Ethiopian Empire referred to the kingdom as Phalasha. This name was later on popularized and also appears in Jewish writings from that period. The 16th century geographer Livio Sanuto referred to the kingdom as the land of the Jews, Jedorim Terah, in his Tabula X map, published in 1588. Leo Africanus also referred to the kingdom of Beta Israel as the land of the Jews. Now, understand, the ones who are writing this are referring to them as Beta Israel, but understand they were called by the ancient people like Leo Africanus the land of the Jews. Another name which was very common in the 16th and 17th century was the kingdom of Simeon, given the kingdom after the area which is dominated after it lost control over the regions of Dembia and Wegera. Now, it's called the kingdom of Simeon. My guess is the reason why it was called the kingdom of Simeon, because the influence of the tribe of Simeon. Simeon and what? Manasseh. As I've mentioned, Eldad talks about the different tribes that lived in that area. I'm of the opinion, this is just my opinion, that the true Jerusalem is further north if we look at modern maps. Otherwise, you can flip it up and say south. But it's north in the area of Tigray by the Simeon Mountains. That's where I believe Jerusalem is. And I'll continue. So according to Beta Israel tradition, the Jewish kingdom of Beta Israel, or kingdom of Simeon, was initially established after Izana was crowned as the emperor of Aksum. Izana, who was educated in his childhood by the missionary Frumentius, so he got influenced by Romans, right? Roman Christianity more than likely, because he tried to force his people to convert. But let me continue. Declared Christianity as the religion of the Ethiopian Empire after he was crowned. The inhabitants who practiced Judaism and refused to convert to Christianity began revolting. This group was referred to as Beta Israel by the emperor. The Beta Israel kingdom was eventually established after a civil war between the Jewish population and the Christian population. So understand, the Beta Israel kingdom was established after the civil war between the Jewish population and the Christian population. They all were Jews. Some of the Jews converted to Christianity, and they had a fight, and they split off. The Aksumite Empire became that Christian empire, that Christian nation, where the Beta Israel kept the kingdom of Simeon. So the Jewish rebels wanted to distinguish themselves from the people who practiced Christianity, and therefore during that civil war, the Jewish community began to migrate out of the empire towards the Simeon Mountains region and the province of Dembia, regions located north of Lake Tana and south of the Tekezi River. At that time, as a region, Simeon was not an integral part of the Aksum Empire, and as a result, the Jews began to establish their kingdom in Simeon. They crowned the first king Phineas, a descendant of the Jewish high priest Zadok, and started a period of territorial expansion eastward and southward. During the mid-9th century, the empire of Aksum began a new expansion, which led to an armed conflict between the empire forces and the Beta Israel forces. The Beta Israel kingdom under King Gideon the Fourth managed to defeat the Aksum forces. So the Israelite forces defeated the Christian forces. Nevertheless, during the battle, King Gideon was killed. As a result, Gideon's daughter Judith inherited the kingdom from her father and took command. Judith's first challenge was to stop any future invasions to the kingdom by the Christian Aksumite Empire. As a result, Judith formed a military alliance with the Agwa, who also opposed the expansion of the Aksumite Empire. So one of the things I look at, family, is the churches that were built, right? Like the Lalibela Church underground. There's many churches over there underground. And then you got the churches that are in the towers. Usually when people build churches or altars or religious things, you know, it's because it's a holy place. My point is that all of this Jewish history in that area, in what we call Ethiopia, which it wasn't called Ethiopia, that all of these Jewish people and traditions, the reason why they're there and they've been there since the 4th century is because that is near Jerusalem. I'm going to continue to make my point. So around 960, the large tribal confederation led by Queen Judith, which included both forces of the Agwa tribes and the Beta Israel forces, invaded the capital of Aksum and conquered and destroyed the city of Aksum, including many churches and monasteries, which were burned and destroyed, and imposed Jewish rule over Aksum. In addition, the Aksumite throne was snatched and the forces of Queen Judith sacked and burned the Debri Damo monastery, which at the time was a treasury and a prison for the male relatives of the emperor of Ethiopia, killing all the potential heirs of the emperor. After the fall of the Aksum Empire, Queen Judith crowned herself as the empress and appointed governors in the provinces which were conquered. Queen Judith ruled over the territory she conquered for around 40 years, establishing trade relations with the neighboring countries and eventually passing the throne on to her descendants. The golden age of Beta Israel kingdom took place according to the Ethiopian tradition between the year 858-1270, in which the Jewish kingdom flourished. During that period, the world Jewry heard for the first time the stories of Eldad Hadani, who apparently visited the kingdom. Marco Polo and Benjamin of Tudela also mentioned an independent Ethiopian Jewish kingdom in the writings from that period. This period ends with the rise of the Christian Solomonic dynasty. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that, you know, this Jewish kingdom with all of these different tribes of Jews, according to Eldad Hadani, right, in this area, which is close to Egypt. So, you know, if you had to leave to go to Egypt, like Yeshua had to do when he was a child, right, it's doable, right? And not only that, you're near the Red Sea, right? If you go all the way out to Djibouti, right, you're near the Red Sea, where you have access to maybe what I'm thinking, I'm theorizing, could be the Sea of Galilee. Now, as I mentioned, it's all theoretical. But I always looked at what happened and how this whole area has a rich history. It has a Roman presence. It has all the tribes, and it has a language called Giz, right, which is for the royal priestly class. They're the ones that use the official old-fashioned Giz language. My theory is, because Giz is a Semitic language, my theory is that Giz is a cursive Hebrew language. Thank you for the gift, Pastor Kelly. Appreciate it. So Giz is a Shemitic language, right? My theory is that that is the original cursive Hebrew. That's my theory. I'm not a linguist, okay? And I'm not trying to prove it. It's a theory. All right, so let's continue. All right. So remember when I read this to you in one of my other shows, right? It's called the letter of Aristeas. It's the letter of Aristeas, and he was sent to go to where? Jerusalem. Who sent him there? Who sent him to Jerusalem? It was Ptolemy. Ptolemy was ruling Egypt. Ptolemy conquered Egypt. He came from Greece, and he conquered Egypt and ruled over Egypt as a pharaoh. And he wanted to get his hands. He wanted to get his hands on the Torah. He wanted to follow the Jewish God. He wanted to get his hands on Torah. So I'm using this to show you where we look. Let's see. Did I mess it up? Let's see. Hold on. Lost my place. All right. So when we look at this writing, and I recommend that you go and read the letter of Atreus. I have the link in my other video, right? If you want to go find it. I forgot which one it was. But the description of Jerusalem, the description of Jerusalem does not fit the Middle East. But, you know, I'm leaning towards this area in northern Ethiopia. Now, I do have a secondary location, which is also the Mountain of the Moon, which is the Rwenzori Mountains in Uganda, but I haven't done enough research on that. So right now, this is my best guess. Because right now, I'm going to tell you, I don't care what anybody say. I'm not convinced. Nobody has convinced me yet that the Middle East is our land. I'm not convinced. Maybe you are. Okay. So this is the letter of Atreus, and it's definitely a good read. I've given you this description of the presence because I thought it was necessary. The next point in the narrative is an account of our journey to Eliezer. But I will first of all give you a description of the whole country. When we arrived in the land of the Jews, where in the land of the Jews, what did they call the area over there in Ethiopia? They called it what? The land of the Jews. When we arrived in the land of the Jews, we saw the city situated in the middle of whole of Judea on the top of a mountain. Wait. Where was the city, family? According to the letter of Atreus. According to the letter of Atreus, family, where was this? Thank you for the gift, Tana. So it was situated. The Jews, we saw the city situated in the middle of the whole of Judea. We saw it situated in the middle of the whole of Judea on the top of a mountain. On the top of a mountain of considerable altitude. Of considerable altitude. Not on the Temple Mount, not on the hill, but we saw it where? In the middle of the whole of Judea on the top of a mountain of considerable altitude. I have a question. Does this sort of not remind you of the stories of Shangri-La up in the mountains, the holy city? I'm just saying. You know, there's always some crossover between cultures, but let me go on. On the summit, so there's a summit as well. I don't see no summit in modern Jerusalem. On the summit, the temple had been built in all its splendor. It was surrounded by 3 walls more than 70 cubits high and in length and breadth corresponding to the structure of the edifice. All the buildings were characterized by magnificence and costliness, quite unprecedented. It was obvious that no expense had been spared on the door and the fastenings which connected it to the doorpost and the stability of the lintel. The style of the curtain, too, was thoroughly in proportion to that of the entrance. All right. I'm gonna scroll down. The temple faces the east and its back is toward the west. The whole of the floor is paved with stones and slopes down to the appointed places. So it's sloping down. Do you see any slopes on the Temple Mount? That water may be conveyed to wash away the blood from the sacrifices. For many thousands of beasts are sacrificed there on the feast days. So it's situated on the mountain. It has slopes. It has a summit. Where did the devil take the Messiah to tempt him? On a high mountain. If you think that place in the Middle East have high mountains, then you got to go all the way over to Jordan. You got to go all the way over to Jordan. But look, make sure, because I'm not going to read it all because I read it all before. Make sure you read the letter of Atreus. Compare that to the descriptions of Jerusalem in the Bible and see how the letter of Atreus lines up with the biblical definition of Jerusalem more so than what we see today. So remember, that was the letter of Atreus and how Ptolemy had sent, right, Atreus to go there and get a copy of Torah. To get a copy of the Torah. And that's why he saw all these things. So Ptolemy, the first Soter, was a companion and a historian of Alexander the Great of the kingdom of Macedon in northern Greece, who became ruler of Egypt, part of Alexander's former empire. Ptolemy was pharaoh of Ptolemaic Egypt from 305 to 304 BC to his death. He was the founder of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which ruled Egypt until the death of Cleopatra in 30 BC, turning the country into a Hellenistic kingdom and Alexandria into a center of Greek culture. This is the guy that wanted a copy of the Torah. He sent his man to Jerusalem, where he went in there and described the city being on a mountain, on the top of a mountain with a high altitude. Now, Ptolemy was in Egypt. Egypt is a reasonable distance to Ethiopia, what we call Ethiopia. So if someone was being persecuted by Herod, right? Yeshua was being chased by Herod. He could have gone easily to that Egypt. Now, if Egypt was located in Kalahari, that's a bigger trip. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just looking at the history of the Israelites in that area, a firm location with a religious culture and Jewish traditions and Christian traditions, knowing that the first Christians were in Israel, or what we call Israel. So you have this huge Christian presence in churches in what we call Ethiopia. Yeah, I didn't say that Jerusalem is in Egypt. I was saying some say that Jerusalem is in the Kalahari Desert, and I was saying the distance between the two. That's what I'm talking about. Someone misunderstood. The distance between the two is longer than the distance between, if the Jerusalem is in what I believe to be near the Simeon Mountains, that's closer to what we call Egypt. So all of this is theoretical. Do I have answers for everything? No. My point is, look at the history, look at the culture, look at what the prophecies say, right? Like I say, I was going to bring out those other prophecies, but this long enough. I'm already an hour and 20 minutes and I'm not finished. All right, so why do I think it's the Simeon Mountains, or could be the Simeon Mountains, where Jerusalem is, or the real Jerusalem? Because we saw the description in the letter of Atreus. The Simeon Mountains are important, not just for biodiversity, but also as a water catchment area. several rivers rise in SMNP and form tributary to the Tekezi River, which provides a source of water for millions of users downstream in Ethiopia as well as Sudan and Egypt. Most rivers in this area flow only after the rainy season. Therefore, the rivers that rise in Simeon and flow year-round are particularly important water source. If the flow of these rivers is altered in any way, for example, through highland deforestation, overgrazing, or abstraction for irrigation, all of which are occurring at present, a highland-lowland imbalance results with loss of perennial water in the lowlands. If such a situation arises, the dry season range of the people and their livestock reduces dramatically. So the point of me reading this is that if you read the letter of Atreus, it talks about how they had access to these rivers that they use, right, to flush the blood and dead animals from off the Temple Mount, or what they call the temple, right? Because remember, as we read, there was a slope and there was a feed that washed the blood and washed the animal stuff down off the mountain, right, and down into the river. We don't see anything like that in modern Middle East. In the Middle East, we don't see anything like that. Assuming you give validity to the letter of Atreus, which to me I do, because the letter of Atreus lines up with what I see how Jerusalem is described in the Bible. The people of SMNP. Surrounded by cultural and historical sites, the Simeon Massif was traversed as a trade route between Axum, Lalibela, that's where the churches are, Mekele, and Gondar. Gondar is one of the places where the Jews live. For over 2,000 years, the Simeon Mountains became home to immigrant settlers, cultivators, of which some of the first recorded were the Ethiopian Jews. However, following the decline of the Jewish kingdom in the 14th century, many Ethiopian Jews converted to Orthodox Christianity. That's where that split happened with Queen Judith and the Axum, and they had to fight in the split. Small populations of Jewish settlers remain in the Simeon Massif, with another 30,000 living in the immediate vicinity of North Gondar zone. In the late 1990s, the remaining Jews immigrated to Israel. Today, the majority of the population are Orthodox Christians, although there are a number of long-term resident Muslim communities. The people of the Simeon Mountains live predominantly by agriculture, but many also own some livestock, mainly sheep, goats, but with cattle. All right. So you can read the rest of that. Now, when I look at this area of the Simeon Mountains, right, it has that water source for what we see in the Eritreans to flush the blood and to flush the animals, leftovers. It has the height and the precipice, that high altitude that we see over there, right? And not only that, we have the history of Jews living in that area. As I mentioned before, the whole famine thing that occurred in the 1980s in Ethiopia was in that area of Tigray, right? The Bible says that that Jerusalem would not be able to feed his people because she was under a curse, under judgment, right? And that's what we saw, right? And we see that area is somewhat desolate. But the other thing is, which I'm not covering here, is that area in Tigray that was somewhat desolate, that did not feed their people, is coming back. The Ethiopians are working on it and cultivating it, and they're doing things to bring the life back to the land, right? So like I say, this is my theory. You don't have to agree with it. Gudit Gies was a queen from the kingdom of Simeon, flourished 1960, who, according to local legend, laid waste to Axum and its countryside, destroyed churches and monuments, and attempted to exterminate the members of the ruling dynasty of the kingdom of Axum. Her deeds are recorded in the oral tradition and mentioned incidentally in various historical accounts. Information about Gaudit is contradictory and incomplete. Paul B. Hens wrote, she is said to have killed the emperor, ascended the throne herself, and reigned for 40 years. Accounts of her violent misdeeds are still related among peasants in the North Ethiopian countryside, hence continues. This sounds like the Queen Judith that we just read. On my first visit to the rock church of Abreha and Asbeha in eastern Tigray, I noticed that its intricately carved ceiling was blackened by soot. The priest explained what it is as the work of Gaudit, who they call, others call her Judith, who had piled the church full of hay and set it ablaze 9 centuries before. All right, let's see. All right, let's go on. We talked about her. All right, so this book, let me bring it up. Okay, it's called A Geographical History of Africa, written in Arabic and Italian by John Leo A. Moore, born in Granada, so forth, so forth, so forth. All right. The Abyssinians, or Abyssinia, are a people subject to Prit Iani. So this Prit Iani, some call him Prester John. We're going to talk about him in a bit. The Abyssinians are a people subject to Prit Iani, whose empire, if we consider the stele, which he used in his letters, had most ample confines. For he instituted himself emperor of the great and higher Ethiopia, king of Goimeh, which, as Botero supposed, is situated between the Niles, which is the Nile, and Zaire, of Vang, a kingdom beyond Zaire, of Damut. Remember I told you about the Demat kingdom? They call it Damut, which confineth with the land of the Anziki. And toward the south, he is called the king of Kafit and Bagamidri, 2 provinces bordering upon the first great lake, which is the original fountain of the Nile, or Nilus. Nile, or Nilus, was a Egyptian god. That's who the Nile is named after. As likewise of the kingdoms of Zoa, Fatigar, Antigote, Baru, Bayal, Gans, Adia, Amada, Ambia, so forth, where the queen of Saba governed. And lastly, Bernages and Loris as fair as Nubia, which bordereth upon Egypt. But at this present, the center or midst of his empire, as Jean Barfros written, is the like of Barsina, for it extended eastward toward the Red Sea as far as Sukwan, the space of 222 leagues. Howbeit between the sea and his dominion runneth in ridge of mountains inhabited by Moors, who are masters of all the sea coasts along, except the port of Oroko, which belongeth to the Prit. And likewise on the west, his empire is restrained by another mountainous ridge stretching along the river of Nile, the Nile River, where are found most rich mines of gold, amongst which are the mines of Damut. Remember I told you the Demat kingdom. And Sinsaj, whole in possession of Gentiles, which pay tribute unto Prit. Northward, it is bounded by imaginary lines supposed to be drawn from Shushan to the beginning of the Isle of Meroe, above mentioned, which line extended in 105 and 20 leagues. So Meroe is over there in Sudan. Now, the area in Meroe used to be called Saba. Now, there's 2 locations they state that the Queen of Sheba, well, really 3 they mention the Queen of Sheba is from. Some say she is from what we call modern Ethiopia. Others say the Queen of Saba is from Yemen. I believe, this is my opinion, that the Queen of Saba is from Saudi Arabia. I mean Sudan, not Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry, family. I had a brain for it. anyway, from Sudan, because in Meroe is in Sudan. Meroe used to be called Sabah. I believe that she's from Meroe, which used to be called Sabah. That's my opinion. Others say she's from Yemen. Others say she's from what we call Ethiopia. From thence, the Abyssinian borders trend south, somewhat crookedly in manner of a bow, as far as the kingdom of Adia. From the mountains whereof springeth a river called the Ptolemy, Raptus, which falleth into the sea about Melinde, for the space of 259 leagues, next unto which borders and inhabit certain Gentiles of black color with curly hair. And here, all right, let's see. The Abyssinians have no great knowledge of Nile by reason of the mountains which divided them from it, for which cause they call Abagni, the father of rivers. Howbeit they say that upon the Nile do inhabit two great and populous nations, one of Jews towards the west, under the government of a mighty king, the other more southerly, consisting of Amazons or warlike women, whereof we will speak more at large in our relationship, Monomotapa. So on one side we had the Jews on the west, and then the other some Amazonian women. All right. And y'all could go read the rest of this because there's a lot. So you got to look at Prester John. That's who they call Pridiyani. And Pridiyani had ruled over that whole area of what we call Ethiopia, all the way down to parts over where we see Uganda and down there, Tanzania, all the way to Uganda, that whole area over there, right across by what we call the Lake Victoria. So according to them, Pridiyani, which they call Prester John, ruled that whole area. So let me give you a little more on Prester John right quick. So this is the area right here, if y'all see that. So this is Prester John. The legend of Prester John, a wealthy Christian king with a kingdom somewhere outside of the Western European realm, pervaded European thought throughout the Middle Ages. The limited understanding of the unexplored regions of the world and the inability to find his kingdom resulted in shifting versions of the legend. Over the course of the Middle Ages, Europeans believed his kingdom existed in the Far East India and finally the interior of Africa. The origin of the legend of Prester John is traced to Bishop Otto of Friesing in the 12th century. According to the bishop, Prester John descended from one of the three magi mentioned in the nativity story of the Bible. The emergence of the legend coincided with the first crusade of European armies into the Near East. The legend then seems to indicate a hope for a powerful kingdom that could serve as an ally in the European campaign to recapture Jerusalem. The prospect of a Christian king seemed realistic enough that in the 12th century, Pope Alexander III sent a message by envoy to the fabled king. The messenger, however, never returned. In 1165, a letter sent to several European capitals from an Ethiopian ruler fueled the legend. This letter reportedly became known as a letter from Prester John. This letter established a concrete connection between Prester John and Africa. All right, so we saw that Prester John, he ruled that whole area right up here. See all of that. And I believe right here is Lake Victoria, and I believe Uganda's like right over here, right? And so Diamat is like right up in this area right here, if you can see that, right? Or Diamat. So it also said that he was supposedly descended from one of the three magi. Everything seems to tie back to Africa, like I said. So the reason why, as I started off, that they would want to get the Ark of the Covenant is because it's more than likely in Ethiopia, what we call Ethiopia, because that's where the Jews are. I mean, the Jews are all over Africa, but I mean, they're center of a stable empire, and as was noted, that they didn't go into slavery, right? I believe because many of them were the tribe of Dan. Right? Judah went into captivity mainly, So we talked about the Demot Empire. So the kingdom of Demot, Amharic, was a medieval kingdom in what is now Ethiopia and ruled by the Walata people of Sidama. The territory was positioned below the Blue Nile. It was a powerful state that forced the Sultanate of Showa to pay tributes. So in that area, we had what we call the modern day of Ethiopia, the Abyssinian Empire, which was before called the Aksumite Empire, which was before called the Demot Empire in that area, which also had the kingdom of Simeon. And that's why I say that whole area is more complex than they tell you. It's not just Ethiopia like they tell you. When you start looking at this, it gets a little more complex. That's all I can say. So Demot, right? Theoretically vocalized, Demot was a kingdom located in Eritrea and northern Ethiopia that existed during the 10th and 5th centuries BC. Few inscriptions by or about this kingdom survive, and very little archaeological work has taken place. As a result, it is not known whether Demot ended as a civilization before the kingdom of Aksum's early stages, evolved into the Aksumite state, or was one of the smaller states united in the kingdom of Aksum, possibly around the beginning of the 1st century. Now, this way you have to stop and ask yourself a question. Okay, we already read that the Aksumite Empire came by the result of a civil war between the Jews. The Jews that converted to Christianity, which ended up creating the Aksumite Empire, and then the Jews who did not convert, who had the kingdom of Simeon. So if that's the case, and we saw that the kingdom of Simeon, all that existed for a long time, what they say to the 4th century, then Demot must be associated with the Jews, right? And if the Jews were in this territory going way back, right, to the, during the 10th and 5th century, I'm just saying, to me, there's something about this area. I'm just doing investigative work. I'm trying to be like a historian, or what's the word? A detective. I'm just trying to be a detective. Eat the meat, spit out the bones. I'm just sharing with you. Almost done. So I wanted to share this with you because I don't know what's going to happen. And so at least you'll be ready to look at it. So here's an older map, right? Finley map of Africa. This was Abyssinia, right? Which is what they would call modern day Ethiopia. And up north up here, okay, you see right here the Aksum Empire, right? But at one time, all of this right here was the Aksum Empire. And right up here in the north of Abyssinia is the territory we call Tigray, right? So just take note of the areas that we're talking about. And up here, you got Senegal, Nubia, and all of that. Senna, Nubia. And we've seen those on other maps, which, we're not going to get into that right now, right? So I just wanted to show you what area it is for Abyssinia. So all right, so I'm gonna read this, and this is gonna be the final one, and then I'm gonna show you that video about what's happening in the world. And this is a real short video. All right. Department of State Division publication. If you want it, I could send it to you, the link to this particular article. All right, let's see, where are we? All right. Ethiopia is the name which is preferred by the government and people of the country. Mr. R.P. Skinner in his Paris Dispatch number 766 of September 23, 1925, wrote as follows. In this connection, I respectfully suggest that it would be more strictly correct to abandon the use of the word Abyssinia in favor for Ethiopia. So it used to be called Abyssinia, not Ethiopia. The government of the country considers Ethiopia to be its proper name. And it is under this name that our treaty appears in the official volume of treaties, conventions, and international acts. And in the body of the treaty, Ethiopia alone is mentioned from time to time. I believe it would be gratifying to the existing government of Ethiopia if the use of the word Abyssinia could be dropped. The suggestion that the name Ethiopia be adopted for official use by the government was approved by Mr. Dulles of the Division of Near Eastern Affairs and was adopted by the United States Geographic Board February 3rd, 1926. So the modern term of Ethiopia is only since 1926. Ethiopia is the term employed not only in the two treaties of 1903 and 1914 between the United States and that country, but also in the treaties between Great Britain and Ethiopia, and it is listed in the Foreign Office list in Diplomatic and Consular Yearbook, Great Britain, 1924, page 48. It also appears as Ethiopia in the ratifications of the Universal Postal Convention signed at Madrid, November 30th, 1920. As also in the Dictionary des Bureaux de Poste, whatever. The name of the country in the language of the country, Amharic, is translated Ethiopia. The objection of the people of the country to the term Abyssinia arises from the fact that the Arabic word Habesha, from which it is derived, means confusion, and that it has come to connote, as the Arabs use it, with reference to Abyssinia, mongrel, strange mixture. So I'm going to leave it right there just to show you that it was never called Ethiopia until 1926. All right, so that's all, family. There's other things I would have talked about, but I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts, some of the things I've been looking at, just in case all hell breaks loose and, internet goes down. Those people out there are still talking about foolish stuff. I don't know if anything gonna happen, So I'm gonna show you this video, and that'll be it because I'm getting a little tired. All right, so someone shared this video with me. Make of it what you will, family. Make of it what you will. I just wanted to keep you alert. All right.
This is absolutely unreal. So many ships out there. Look at, I'm just going to try to give you a view here. This is unreal to me. Look at all the way down the California coast. I'm by Long Beach, but I have a feeling these ships go all the way up through LA. This is unreal.
So some of you all may know more about that than me. Is it abnormal to see a bunch of ships off the coast of California like that? I don't know. I would think it is because, the entrance and exit of ships are usually managed by the port authorities and all that, and they don't just be sitting out there. So I don't know what's going on. I do know that the right wing still expects something to happen tomorrow, even though Trump gave his going away speech today. I don't know what's going to happen. All I care about is that we make it out of here. So that's it, family. Wanted to share that with you. And, y'all do some more research because, y'all do good research. Share it with us, put it out there on Hebrew Sphere and, let's figure this out. Yeah, that's where I'm leaning towards Jerusalem being and is up there near the Simeon Mountains. That's just my thought up there in the Tigray region. So peace and blessings, Israel. Your captivity is ending. Love you with the love of the Messiah. And keep sharing your information with me. I appreciate it. Can't find it all myself. And, look out for each other and pray for one another. Love y'all with the love of the Messiah.